Hello and welcome back to the James Kennedy Podcast, you sexy, awesome, brilliant, wonderful, and lovely people. How the hell are you doing? Man, a lot has happened in this past 2 weeks. As I mentioned on last week's episode, our man Julian Assange is now walking free in the sunshine of his homeland in Australia. And for the first time in 14 years, Britain is Tory free, baby. They're gone. Who would have thought we'd ever live to see the day? They're gone, and good riddance. Now we've got to see what wonders the newly changed Labour Party have got in store for us all. And oh, I cannot wait for that. Sarcasm intended. But hey, we're used to the grind by now. So, how much worse can it be, really? And last week, we kicked off the first date of the James Kennedy and the Underdogs UK tour with our brothers in Amongst Liars. A tour that will be continuing tomorrow as we hit Leicester, Sheffield and Manchester before moving on to Reading, Cardiff and Wolverhampton. Man, I can't wait to see all you gorgeous people there. If you want to know where we're playing and when and where we're partying afterwards, go and hit me up on Instagram at JamesKennedyUK and I'll keep you posted. But look, I just want to jump straight into today's episode because we have got somebody on today that I am a huge fanboy of and I make no secret of it. I have been enjoying this guy's work for many, many years, as have millions of people around the world. He is one supremely talented motherfucker and the visionary of so many well-loved characters from the world of comics, TV, and movies. He is also a super cool dude and all-round nice guy. So, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome onto the show today artist and comic book illustrator to some of the most popular characters ever penned, including The Boys, Wolverine, Deadpool, Spider-Man, and my personal favorite, the iconic, subversive, anarchic masterpiece that is Transmetropolitan. I'm speaking, of course, about the uber-talented, the one and the only, Mr. Darick Robertson. How the hell are you doing, sir?
Hi, Jamie. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too, bro. I've been looking forward to it, man.
Apologies to your listeners that I'm not Warren Ellis, but I'll try to hold up my end of things.
He didn't draw the pictures, bro. That's
true. He did not.
That is the main thing for me. Obviously, everything about Transmetropolitan is fucking genius.
That thing would not have existed with that. That is one of the most pure and excellent collaborations I've ever had as far as getting to be me, and then at the same time bringing in what Warren wanted, because he was a really great collaborator, right, as far as knowing when to let go and then knowing when to be specific, and that's a very rare combination. And we made it work for 60 issues, which is really a miracle considering that the scripts would come in pretty slowly and in pieces, and I'd have to take on other work waiting for an issue and then finish it all up really quickly and still try to keep that detail level up. So I don't think I could do that job today, but I'm happy it exists.
It feels very much to me, I talk about this with musicians that come on the podcast, there are some albums like, say, Dark Side of the Moon or something like that, where you could just tell that everybody involved is on. It's just one of those rare moments in time when the stars just align and everybody involved is just on. It's the right time. Everything just works right. Yeah. And I felt like that when I discovered Transmetropolitan. I was like, the dialogue, the commentary, the artwork, the vision, the whole world, it's just on,
It really set me free in a lot of ways because the original vision for the book, came with very little detail. It was more like a nutshell concept one. But I had worked with Warren at a small company called Malibu Ultraverse, and I had done a create-a-own book for them that I was basically waiting for a green light. I co-created a character that got kind of like finagled away from me in a way that I'm still salty about, but they offered me other work in the meantime, and our editor was Hank Canals, who would go on to help found Image, and actually had already helped found Image. If you see that classic photo of all the Image guys, the guy that's not an artist in there, that's Hank. Right. But he founded Image with those guys. Those guys split off. He ended up helping Malibu Ultraverse get going, which was a fun company, and I wish it had lasted. They ended up selling off everybody to Marvel. But the opportunity I had in the meantime while I was developing my create-a-own book called Ripfire, which never got off the launching pad, really got one issue out, and then the whole company went on, which is like story of my career. Like I always show up at the pool party, and about the time everybody's drunk and we all get naked, the cops show up. That's my carear. Like, fuck, not again. So,
it sounds like your career sounds like my party.
I gotta make it over to Wales.
Yeah, man.
But we had it just, but it's always been that kind of weird timing. But the good news out of that was because we had a late start I had a late start going in with my own thing. I got paired up. They needed an artist for a few issues of this book called Ultra Force. And if you look at the early covers done by the brilliant, late, great George Perez, who I loved and miss, you could see there was a lot of potential in them, but it was the 90s. And so the 90s had a habit of like, how can we regurgitate new heroes with this one kind of like archetype over and over again? Like, this is your Storm type. This is your Superman type. This is your this type. And then they would come up with a variation of that.
Right.
And this will segue into the boys. But what was really great, though, is that they handed me these scripts by a guy I'd never worked with before named Warren Ellis. And I'm reading Warren's script, and the weirdest part was there was another writer named Ian Edgington who was doing the dialogue. And like in retrospect, I go, there's no world where you want somebody besides Warren Ellis to do the dialogue.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's Warren's. It's like, hey, we're gonna have. It's like the Beatles singing backup on. For that guy on My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, back when it's like, oh yeah, you Beatles, you can come in here and do backup singing. Yeah. Okay. But they were just Tony Sheridan, but they were just happy to, they were poor kids hoping to get some money and hey, we're in a recording studio. Look at us. Maybe this will go somewhere. Yeah. You've heard of the Beatles. It didn't really take off for them. It's a shame how they've been lost.
Yeah, they had a lot of potential, those guys. So it's a shame, man.
Yeah, I don't know. Them and the Rolling Stones, they just never found their audience. But
it's a shit business, bro.
Yeah, I know. It's not fair. But so Warren wasn't writing his own dialogue, but his scripts were amazing. And he would just put these weird little details in there that made I could smell the room reading his writing. I got a feel for like what their boots must have felt like to walk around in. I mean, there was just something very palpable and real about how he approached these otherwise kind of goofy characters. And I was blown away, and I had a really good time drawing those issues. There was lots of action in them, and because they were kind of like silly, fringe, not real popular characters they were hoping for them to be, I had a lot of freedom to kind of exaggerate them and do my own thing with them. And it ended up being a fun 3 issues to draw, and they were good plots. They were interesting plots. But like he had a moment where the characters were sitting around working on a case, and he said the description was they're eating bacon sandwiches and drinking black coffee. And I was like, oh, that's a nice detail. And I could just smell the room all of a sudden, and I knew what that would look like. I could see these guys eating bacon sandwiches and drinking black coffee. So, I had one of them pouring, but that was what was really fun. But when it was towards the end, I said to the editor, I'm like, can you put me in touch? This is pre-email because I'm old. But I said, could you put us in touch? And I'd like to talk to him. So I rang him up and I said, hey, these are the best scripts I've read in a long time. And I have a nose for talent like nobody's business. I can brag on that with decades of experience now, because I told Jim Lee when I first met him and he was drawing Alpha Flight, I go, they should put you on X-Men.
Oh, shit, bro.
Anyway,
wow.
So but with Warren, I just said, I think, you're going to be huge in this business. You're going to be a superstar. He's like, and he was real modest about it. He's like, yeah, good luck with that. I was lucky I got this gig.
Right.
He's very humble. And I was right. And but I said, if you ever want to do a monthly book together, please keep me in mind. I'd love to collaborate with you on something on an ongoing basis. And it was really shitty because like in that little window, and still want to, if you ever have those time machine moments where like, I wish I could get in a time machine and undo that decision.
Right.
So in that moment, Marvel came to me and said, hey, do you want to work? Alan Davis is leaving Excalibur. Would you like to be the replacement artist on Excalibur? That's drawing Nightcrawler and, Rachel Summers Phoenix. And, it was a good book. And, but I was like, the idea of it was also a little bit like, hey, I don't know if you ever saw Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story.
Oh, yeah.
There's a great scene where he's a fictional rock and roll star that goes through like it's a parody of every music biography that's ever been made. And John C. Reilly is amazing in it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
he sings his own music and does great. So, but at one point, they got him and he's got to follow Buddy Holly and Elvis, you know, and then it's his turn, you know. So that's kind of how I felt like, oh, I'm going to follow up. And the book wasn't doing great. And I'm like, oh, so you want, you know, fucking rookie of the year to come in and take over for Alan fucking Davis? I mean, I assume it's okay that I swear, right?
Fuck yeah, go for it.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah. So I'm following up Alan fucking Davis, you know. I'm like, there's no way. So I was a little bit on the fence, and then also I was supposed to do this creator-owned book that didn't get off the bench. So I said I passed on it, and also didn't know who the writer was going to be because the guy that was supposed to come on backed out. So it was going to be like an unknown writer. I'm following up Alan Davis. It was going to be a monthly book. But that was at the time when Marvel was selling and giving royalties to artists. So there was like, I could have made a killing financially. And then it turns out that writer was Warren Ellis. But after I had said no, I found out Warren Ellis was
typical. So,
yeah. So instead of Transmetropolitan, there might have been a long run on Excalibur, but which would have been awesome. But anyway, didn't work out that way. Life is funny, but didn't work out so bad because when Marvel went bankrupt, Warren had called me up and said, hey, they're starting this new company called Helix. I've been asked to, I pitched a book that they want to do, and I'm curious if you want to be the artist. We'd done another small project together too called Man of the Atom, and he was very happy with what I did there because it was a lot of sci-fi and talking rather than superhero action. He wasn't sure how I'd handle that, and he liked it. And I was known primarily as a superhero artist at the time, which is very funny because after I did Transmetropolitan, people didn't know I could do superheroes. So they want to pigeonhole you wherever they can.
Yeah.
But Transmetropolitan was exactly the kind of book I was sort of dying to do because I loved indie comics. I loved Love and Rockets and Peter Bag's Hate, and I liked. And the weirder the better. I was really into new wave and punk music, and that was really my taste. And I really wanted to do something that would unleash that. And Spider Jerusalem for me ended up kind of being my spirit animal. Like, he is the me I wish I could walk around being, and apparently I'm not alone because so many people identify to him.
Oh,
but it was Warren's cynicism and my happy anger, but also he was just a fun character. I was already a fan of Hunter S. Thompson, and Warren was much better read than I was with his world of and understanding of what politics were happening at the time. And I like to say Warren made me a better American because I was not as dialed into what was happening as Warren was. And by the time I finished that book, I was now I'm unstoppable. I can't help but consume everything. I am Spider in that chair of fire going, give me information. So, but that's, and also when like you see me outspoken online, it's because as half of that team, I feel like it's my responsibility to be that guy. But as the other half of Spider Jerusalem, I feel like I have to represent. But but it ended up being a really great thing. But the editor at the time was like unsure if I could handle the job because she thought I was a superhero artist. And so the editor-in-chief, my friend Karen, but she was like unsure. So she said, well, have him try out on this other thing. But the editor wanted me, the writer wanted me. It was an original idea, and I had already drawn designs. And I was like, no. I'm busy. And then at the same time, Marvel had offered me Spider-Man Team Up, and I was having to make a choice, like, am I going to do this or that? And I'd still love to do Spider-Man Team Up, but that's fine. But at the same time, my friend gave me some good advice and said, if you do something original and it takes off, Spider-Man will still be there. And I'm like, good point. So I rolled the dice. And I said, the Marvel had just gone through bankruptcy. I wasn't sure. I was literally thinking about getting out of comics entirely because I was still young.
Christ.
Well, I mean, it looked like the comic book industry was imploding and I wasn't finding work. And I'm like, I'm still young. I could go to medical school. I'm good with my hands, My wife talked me out of it.
Thank God.
Yeah, she was like, before we were married too. So she was really banking on me doing okay as an artist.
Well, God bless him, man.
But I ultimately I had to decide, and I really wanted to do this book. It sounded like a great idea, and the script was awesome. I had already gotten the first script at that point, but they wanted me to audition before I did that, and I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do. I'll do the first 3 issues, and if you're not happy with them, I get my ownership for designing and creating the characters, and I'll move on. You can bring on whoever else you want. Is that fair? But I don't have time to audition for you. I've simply been around too long and do too much to audition for a book that I'm creating, And they said, okay, well, that's fair. And so I turned in the first 4 pages of number 1, and my contract showed up the next week. So I was
there we go.
Held my position, and they were very happy with it. And then I would go on to do all 60 issues. We got nominated for Eisners. We got, we have been a perennial seller. We've made the top 100 of a multiple best of all time list, which from multiple publications, Rolling Stone, Comics Journal, Playboy magazine at the time, heralded us as one of the 10 best ever. So I was amazed how well we did after the book was published, because while we were doing it, it barely stayed afloat, and they kept threatening to cancel us. But we kept the team together from issue 5 on. We kept the whole team. Went through like 9 editors, but we kept the same artistic team.
It's the classic story that there are so many it really iconic like creations, like The Life of Brian, Monty Python, or Nirvana's Nevermind, that have that same sort of story where it's like they were doing it on the bones of their ass with no budget. They were up against resistance.
Absolutely.
And then it just became this fucking timeless masterpiece, classic. You know what I mean? It sounds very much like the same sort of experience.
You can't imagine the world without it. And and I'm not bragging about my thing specifically, but I know what you're saying when you tell that story. It's like, oh my God, like there's a world where Tom Selleck was Indiana Jones, But if it weren't for Magnum PI, we wouldn't have Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, and he probably would have killed it. I love Tom Selleck, but I mean, it would not be that movie.
100%. Yeah, man. Yeah, no, it's funny how life works out like that sometimes, isn't it? And it's beautiful when it happens, especially when it gives us such an iconic piece of work like Transmetropolitan. And that's not even to mention all of the other iconic stuff that you've done, which we're going to come on to. But you must be so proud looking back at the huge cultural kind of landmark that you made quite unknowingly during that time.
It remains my favorite of all the creator-owned stuff I've done so far. It still holds a very special place in my heart because of the entire experience. And I went through the 5 craziest years of my life working on that book, which I'll return to.
Okay, well, I'm dying to know already. But I wanted to ask you, when you look back at Transmetropolitan now, as I have done recently, are you shocked at how fucking close to the mark you guys actually were in terms of how things would turn out politically and socially?
That is the craziest part of that book, is like how prescient we ended up being. And what the funniest part is, we were thinking of a world like decades away. Like we were not thinking about a couple of decades. We were thinking hundreds of decades.
Right.
And the other funniest thing is, like, of all, this is an audio recording. I'm about to hold up my iPhone. This is the only thing I couldn't predict.
Right, of course.
Social media and iPhone.
Yeah. Well, was it just chance then that you got so much of it right?
Yeah, that was total. Well, I mean, here's what's funny. I'm going to be a little more philosophical about that statement. I don't know if you pay attention to such things, but if you ever really get anxious about the state of the world, you know what will calm the fuck out of you? Read history, because we are in a loop. We go through loops. My father explained it to me once. It's a pendulum that it'll swing back and forth. Never panic too much, because it's always going to swing the other way.
Right.
When things get a little too left wing, they'll come back to the right. When too right wing, they'll come back to the left. It's a pendulum. It just goes like this. But at the same time, like history, as the split ends sing, it never repeats. But the truth is, it does. And we're living through a time now where we're watching some very familiar patterns play out.
Yeah.
So it's scary because we know how bad it can get, but it's also comforting because probably aren't going to go there. But with Transmetropolitan, so Warren was tapping into the post-Watergate years in American politics. The Beast was representative of Nixon. The Smiler was supposed to be representative of a couple of politicians, but physically we based him on Tony Blair and Jimmy Carter. So, and then we were both kind of loving he has a number of other journalists that he was following that I don't remember their names, which I'm ashamed of. But we both agreed on Hunter S. Thompson, who I had read also and was a fan of. Oh, and by the way, before he died, he gave Transmit a big thumbs up, and he was not crazy about parodies of himself. But apparently, I found it early days of websites. He was. I found on Hunter S. Thompson's website a very nice write-up about Transmetropolitan.
Wow.
So he liked Spider Jerusalem, which made me feel like,
oh man, well,
I did something right in this world.
That's an endorsement right there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I wish I knew how to do a screen grab. too early on my technological
with your Polaroid
skills.
Camera.
Pretty much, yeah, it would have been that. That's the only screen I probably could have got it on. But yeah, that's where we both came from. So in a weird way, Warren was casting a wide net for what he saw the future to be, but we were both discussing it. And what I really love about that world and creating that world with him is that I had a lot of my own freedom to bring my own ideas in, and he would rather, like, he was a wonderful collaborator in playing yes and. He would never say no, but, or, which was an old Chuck Jones way of running his cartoon writing room. You couldn't say no. You had to say yes. And it's an old improv trick too. Works in music as well.
Yes.
You don't change the song. You pick up on what your, other player is doing. And so that's what we were really good. We were like a good band. So I throw something in the background, like with issue 1, I would just, I was much younger. I'd stay up very late at night watching late night TV, getting high and getting through deadlines. And I'd stay up till like 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, then sleep from 7 to 1 and do it all over again.
Wow.
And so I was, I didn't have kids. I was in my 20s. It was a very different world. And, and this was cable TV was kind of a new thing. So, or satellite TV where you had like 500 channels.
Yeah.
So you could do that, or DVDs and VHS and all that stuff. So I was very much consuming mentally, and anything that would catch my imagination or whatever, I would just weave it into whatever it was, whatever panel I was working on, which is why there's like a real stream of consciousness going on in the backgrounds of those. And sometimes I would just get a funny idea, and but that's what I loved about that world, and why I brought that up is that there was no wrong for me. And I love that. It was so freeing. And if I did something, I would make sure all the details that Warren asked for were in there. Like the specific example from issue 1, Spider's coming down off the mountain and he pulls into a toll booth, and there's a guy working there. And the only thing that Warren had really mentioned was he's got this switch on his neck and he's kind of scratching at it. So I made sure he did that, and there was a switch in his neck. But in the background, I just threw a calendar up because paper calendars were going to be around forever. I threw a calendar up that said with a Muppet and a naked woman, and wrote sex puppets. I don't know what it was. It just made me laugh. It was like the kind of thing I would have written on my binder in high school. Yeah. It was it's like I was doodling on the page. And but then later on, he'd come back and go, "Hey, what was sex puppets about?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I thought about that." I said, "Well, I imagine in the future they would try to do like a Sesame Street show for sex education for kids, but the first thing that would happen is that they'd want to profit off it. And so it would go from being PBS to Cinemax, and the girls would get hotter, And there was also a movie called Meet the Feebles that I had seen around that time, and it made me laugh. And so it was like this sort of progressive idea of a progressive, not politically, but progressive as it grew.
Yeah.
Of like these puppets, and the show would become very popular, and the women would get hotter, and suddenly it's like one of the biggest shows on TV because people are weird and perverted. So that was sex puppets. And so when he got to issue 5, he goes, "I like that. I want to write it in." I'm like, "Awesome, go for it." So by issue 5, he's watching sex puppets, and we kept bringing them back around. But that's where sex puppets came from. It's that little calendar in the background of issue 1, and the design drawing I did of Spider Jerusalem, like right out the bat, he's like one of the most fully realized characters I ever sat down and just drew. His original name was Caleb Newcastle, but
Spider Jerusalem's better.
Yeah, it is. The editor thought so too. He came back, said it's too English.
Yeah.
But he said, but I drew him as Caleb Newcastle. But the only descriptions I got from Warren is that he was bald, he was covered in tattoos, and he wore a black suit with no shirt. And I was like, got it. And so I sat down and I designed him. And then, of course, who he is, this journalist and all this stuff, and getting in trouble and getting beat up by cops. And I said, okay, I got it. So I sat down and I drew the initial drawing of him cold. I just did the entire first drawing of him. And I pretty much nailed him right out the gate. I mean, he changed a little bit, but I gave him piercings. I had like hovering piercings, which I thought were kind of like a cool thing. Like they would float around his ear, like magnetically. I have a fascination with magnetics. But then Warren was like, nah, the piercings are overdone. Let's leave the piercings out. I said, cool. And then I gave him stubble, and I didn't know that he would go into the shower and lose all his hair. I thought he would constantly be like, working. So I gave him kind of like choppy, cropped hair and a little bit of stubble. And he's like, no, he's burned all the way down. So no hair at all. I'm like, got it. But I left his eyebrows because I figured even the, shower would be programmed to avoid your eyes.
Right.
But I didn't want to draw the tattoos because I knew I'd have to do them issue after issue after issue.
Right.
I got a lot of pushback, and so I ended up making an action figure, a custom action figure out of a Michael Jordan from Space Jam, and I painted him up and drew all the tattoos on him
as a reference,
so I could just stand him and turn him around and remember what's where.
Right. Yeah.
And I still have that in a box somewhere.
I'd love to see that sometime, man.
Yeah, I got a photograph. Next time he surfaces, I'll take pictures of him. He should be online. I would take him with me to places. But anyway, that was. But I finally succumbed and I drew the tattoos, and Spider Jerusalem was born. So he was. But I drew this cat next to him, and I had him like he just finished taking a piss in an alleyway.
Yeah.
And then you can see this futuristic background behind it. But I drew this crazy mutant cat on the initial design drawing, and I gave him the 3 eyes and the 2 mouths, and I gave him 5 legs. But Warren asked about that. He's like, "What's with the cat?" And I said, "Oh, I just figure in the future, like, God knows what's ending up in dumpsters, and strays would still be out of control. So, like, cats would be eating like leftover pharmaceuticals or licking up like, this super whatever the fuck's in the liquids of all the shit that Spider consumes and is around, and they just start to mutate, So you just have these weird, freaked out looking animals, dogs and cats, like walking around stray." And he goes, "Oh, that's cool. I like that cat. Let's make it his pet." And I said, "Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, I'm done. I'm there. Let's do it." So, that's the way we would collaborate. It was
that's awesome.
And the glasses in the bag were all me, because I just figured, he would need something to carry his computer in, and because laptops was as far as I could imagine in the future. And I didn't even think about this shit. Anyway. I was tapping my wrist, listeners.
His imaginary Apple Watch, yeah. Right.
I figured, who knows? I could have embedded it in his arm with the way Warren was thinking.
Yeah, man.
But I kind of like the tangibility of him. One of the things I love about Star Wars so much is that it feels like a real world that you can get in there and work with. Like, I love that Han Solo would have to, pound the side of the Millennium Falcon to get it to start up. Like, there's something very real about the mechanics in the Star Wars world that turned me on. So I like bringing that element to anything I create. And so I wanted that for Spider. So I gave him that bag, that shoulder bag, little Indiana Jones inspired. And I gave him those, and I gave him the glasses, and the glasses were all me, because I created a character at Malibu Ultraverse, which I sort of got pried away from me. And one of the ideas was that he would have this big red eye that would take pictures. And that was part of this other character. When I lost the character rights, I said, fuck it, that's mine, and I'm going to put it on Spider. And I did. And at first Warren was like, "What's with these glasses?" And I was like, and I told him, like, the right lens takes pictures, and the left lens is like a mapping guide. He can use them like a computer on his eyes. And I basically created Google glasses before they were. And so, and the Apple thing that they just came out with, I saw somebody walking in the street on a video. I'm like, "It's Transmet! It's my guy!" There's actually a guy walking with goggles like that in issue 1. And when Spider first gets to the city, and I did a side by, I'm like, "That's uncanny how much that looks like I predicted this."
Totally, man.
But Warren was like, "That's so weird." He goes, I like it though. But when you see Spider first take the glasses from the maker, And the first reaction Spider says was, "What the fuck are these? Are you on drugs again?" That was his little jab at me, like, because that's practically what he said to me when he looked at him. He was like unsure about him, and then they ended up becoming iconic. So.
Oh man, it's so fascinating hearing all of these little influences and references and stuff that I had no idea about when I was just consuming the thing. You know?
Yeah, no. The best part was like, a lot of people just assumed Warren described everything, but it was really. Right. Different in that, like, and I never like to sound like I'm trying to take anything away from Warren's brilliance, because those scripts were fucking brilliant. But but the more we went on, the more he let me play. And so, he would not, like I said, if we using the band analogy, if I was Ray Manzarek, he was Jim Morrison, and he would do his thing and do it awesome. But I was there, like, doing the bass with the keyboard,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You need both. You couldn't take one of you away, because it's a visual medium. You created a whole visual world,
But you never saw Jim Morrison running over to Ray Manzarek and play like this,
Yeah.
Ray was doing his thing,
Yeah.
So, but that's how Warren was to work with. So the more we went on, like in the scripts themselves, they would say less and less. They would, in a lot of play, unless he had a very specific thing he was trying to achieve. And I would always adhere to what he needed. As best I could. But if he said, but in some places, like, he would just go, draw us a low or a high vision of the city, make it loud and noisy. And that's all he'd write, just that one sentence. And it would be a splash page. And I would just go to town. Like, and so all the little signs in the background, like Mr. Tree. And I drew this was issue 8 I'm describing, but I drew my friend Brian Posehn, who you can see in the first steps of The Mandalorian, but we weren't famous then. But he's holding up a little. He's a comedian, very talented and great actor. But he's holding up a little pamphlet that says "Insane Posehn's used porno clones," and that was that's just something I thought up because I thought it would be funny, and I wanted an excuse to draw Brian into the panel. So but it was stuff like that.
What a project to have at that age. Where you're in your 20s, you're consuming all this content from everywhere and everywhere, and you got the freedom.
And the world was changing so quickly that I didn't realize that we were at the top of a like a bobsled ride. I did not. Technologically, we had just kind of gotten used to the email.
Yes, right.
And we just started to really understand what the reach of the internet was. I'll tell you this. Amazon.com was only selling books.
Yep, I remember, man.
In 1997. And I wish, again, if I'm going back in time to get that Excalibur series with Warren going, I'm also going to stop off and go, buy stock in Amazon.
I know, right?
Not too late to get Apple stock.
Oh, could have seen that one coming. Well, it sounds incredibly similar to my experience with my first album, Made in China. I was like 22 when it came out. So I was at that age where I was just, discovering who I was and learning about the world. And I was just a sponge absorbing, everything and anything I can get my hands on, all different types of music, books, political ideas. And I was very lucky that I had a project to spew it all out into without any restraint. I didn't have a label. Very similar situation to what you're describing with the first issue of Transmetropolitan. No interference from anybody, complete and utter freedom to just explore and be as wild and as ambitious as I wanted to be. And I look back at that kind of innocent time of discovery and experimentation and freedom with a lot of nostalgia, And I feel very lucky that I actually had a project like that to throw all these things into. It sounds like Transmetropolitan was a very similar experience for you.
Yeah, I mean, that is a definite plus to that project. I would having that freedom. I don't know that I knew what I had. It was a very strange time in comics, and we were so close to getting canceled all the time that it felt like nobody was reading it. So it felt like there was a little part of me, it's like, oh, I'm just wanking here. It's like nobody gives a fuck about my crazy future world ideas. Then nobody likes this character. Warren doesn't like me. Like, I don't think that was necessarily true, but that's what my brain was feeding me. I was, so it was all kinds of that stuff. And, but then, it kept getting attention, and then it would get, I said, we won Eisner nominations and lost a Preacher, ironically. But but I could slowly see that we had something good. And again, they tried to cancel us at issue 6, or they were considering canceling us at issue 6 when the entire line of Helix comics went under. And we were the only thing that was kind of selling. And so they said, we're thinking about just bringing you over to Vertigo. And we were like, yeah, that works for me. And that's when that happened. But it was a little weird because we were like, geez, are we getting the chopping block? But Warren and I were like absolutely sure we were going to get canceled after 4 issues just because of the stuff we were doing. Like they're never going to let us keep publishing this. Spider Jerusalem's making the president shit himself in a bathroom. Like they're not going to publish this. Guess we were wrong.
Thank God. I mean, do you think that was a timing thing, though? I mean, could that happen now?
It helps to do something different. What I've realized, the smart thing I've done, if there is anything smart that I've done, because I lament about all the dumb choices I've made, the smart thing I did early in my career was not give up on the idea of running off and making something original.
Love it.
So the very first thing I ever did in my career that got me published, I was 17 years old and I did a book called Space Beaver. And Space Beaver was a funny animal comic. And a lot of people thought I was inspired by Ninja Turtles. And I wasn't. I was aware of them, but I wasn't really into them. I was into much geekier stuff. Like I really loved Rocket Raccoon, who would go on to be a big MCU character, but I really loved Rocket Raccoon. And that was being drawn by Mike Mignola at the time, this little mini series that Marvel did. And just brilliant early Mike Mignola art. For your listeners, Mike Mignola is the creator of Hellboy. And then also there's this DC book that I liked from a very young age called Captain Carrot and the Amazing Zoo Crew. And it was just this fun Justice League of like kind of Warner Brother inspired animals and as superheroes, but they were drawn brilliantly by Scott Shaw. And I loved his art style. I loved his storytelling, and I love the character design so much that I wanted to create something like that. But I just made it up as a doodle in summer school. I really didn't think it was going to get published. I would just draw to entertain myself. And somebody got a hold of it, and you can read about it on my website because it's too long to tell the story. But the thing came out of it is I was a published artist writer out of my senior year in high school.
Right.
So, and then I got thrown in the deep end like, okay, you're in the publishing business, kid.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know I should have 4 issues of the first of the series done before publishing issue 1. So I'm scrambling from then on to get more issues out. And, and again, the pool party analogy, like the Ninja Turtles had blown the black and white market up into a big balloon. And so everybody wanted to find the next Ninja Turtles, which is why I got published, I'm sure. But then they popped that balloon right as my book came out. So my book got lost to time, and, it almost became a TV series, but it didn't happen. And, but it did get me going to conventions and things like that and meeting other professionals like Jim Lee, who drew me a Space Beaver. But I got to meet a lot of people at the beginning of their careers, and I met a lot of really interesting folks along the way. I found, ironically, I pulled some stuff out of my attic this last weekend because we're organizing, and I found this old briefcase from 1992, 93 that held all my work, all my business papers, everything I used to keep in this old briefcase. And it was like opening a time capsule.
Oh, wow. I bet. Yeah.
And in there, I know your readers can't see, or your listeners can't see this, but I'm going to show you so you know.
I can, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, so I'm not full of shit. Can you see it?
Yeah, what is that?
It's Stan Lee's business card from Marvel Films, which he gave me.
Wow.
Because I was meeting people like that. In those days, you could go to a convention, and you're lucky if there was 4,000 people there, total. Right. That would be a big con in those days. But Stan would be there, and he'd just be hanging out. There'd be like a little, because I was an artist, I had the pro pass.
Right.
They'd have a little after parties and things like that. So I just shot the shit with Stan, and he's, I like your stuff, kid. Here's my card.
Wow.
So I kept that card. Amazing. I would later work with him, but it's just funny how those days in the late 80s was a really interesting time to break in. So I didn't get rich, but I got but I got a wealth of knowledge. How's that?
Right.
Like I got to learn, and in those days, I learned how every aspect of the comic book industry worked at the time, because I was writing and drawing a comic book. I was going out to Diamond Distributors at 2:00 in the morning on Tuesdays to unpack boxes for New Comics Wednesday from 2 to 6 a.m. And so I was learning how distribution worked and how that side of things worked. The guy that published my book owned a comic book store, so he had me work the counter when he wanted days off so I could make some extra money, because Lord knows I wasn't really rolling around in those non-existent space fever dollars. So I would work the counter. I would work whatever jobs I could work.
Right.
So I worked at the counter. So I worked behind the counter at a comic book shop. I worked out at the distributor, and they liked me enough that they ended up bringing me on for a full-time job. So I would go out there and sweep and organize and things like that. But I learned a lot talking to those people, seeing how orders were filled.
Right.
It was a really interesting experience. So, I gleaned a wealth of knowledge for how everything trickles. So by the time I got into mainstream comics, I really knew what I was doing. I also still have a healthy work ethic as a result of knowing that, shit, if my book's late, that fucks up the distributor, puts them in a tough spot, fucks up the retailer, puts them in a tough spot. So I try very hard not to be late on books, but life happens.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels there, man, between the music world, because, as an independent artist, I very much had to follow the same trajectory. I've had to learn about distribution. I've had to learn about promotion and retail and mastering and barcodes and all that fucking bullshit, because I've always had to do all of it myself, for better or worse, But I'm actually really glad that I've had that experience now, because it does give me a much deeper appreciation of every other aspect of the chain and where I fit into it and why things have to work in a certain way, into a certain schedule, And I think that that's really useful for creatives in any field to know, because when I speak to people like, who've been signed to a major label, from the age of 19 or something, I'm amazed at how fucking little they know about anything. Like, they literally don't know how to do basic shit. Like, heaven forbid, they lose their record deal and their publicist and their driver and their guitar tech and their fucking assistant and their tour manager, they'd be fucked.
Right.
And, as the old saying goes, knowledge is power. So even though it's a harder road and you have to carry more of the load, in the end, it just gives you more freedom and more power,
Right. And that, I think when you get people with big egos, it's the people that don't understand the chain.
Yes.
You don't realize how many people it took to build the stage you're standing on. You just know you got to command that stage.
Yeah.
But it's really, it's good to know, how many hours that stage took to build and how lucky you are that time was spent.
100%.
And that it's an honor to be on that stage. It's not about you.
Yeah.
It's about what you can bring to that stage. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if you take everybody else in the chain away, you've just got some dude dancing in silence on stage. You know what I mean? In darkness. You know what I mean?
It's true.
Well, how has the industry changed then? Because, I'm sure the music industry is pretty fucked these days. It's struggling.
Yeah. Well, comics. I would say the comic book industry is kind of fucked too.
Right.
Old paradigms are dying. And and again, we were talking about how the pendulum swings and how things go cyclically. Every time I've been through enough of this that I'm not worried about it, because I'm already seeing it happening. But again, if you get worried about things, look at history, and then you'll figure out your place in it going forward.
Yeah.
And historically with comic books, I've noticed that we've been through this before a number of times. Like I was telling you, Transmet was born of me getting ready to leave the industry and Marvel being bankrupt. Now, imagine right now the idea that Marvel could go bankrupt.
Yeah, true.
It's outrageous, But I want you to also imagine a world where Spider-Man is sort of like that character people used to like. You're like, oh yeah, I remember when he was really popular. Because that's going to happen too. Mark my words. Maybe not in our lifetimes, but it's going to happen.
Right.
And the reason I will tell you this is because who was super popular when I was 7 years old? So much that they made action figures? The Lone Ranger.
He's holding up a toy of the Lone Ranger, just in case you're wondering.
I got this on eBay years ago, and I bought it off a guy that was the product salesman. You go to toy stores and go, this is the Lone Ranger toy. And so that's a perfect one in a near perfect box, which is almost impossible to find. And I got one when I was 7 years old. Now, the reason I bring that up is, how often do you hear about the Lone Ranger anymore?
Never.
They did a Johnny Depp movie. It flopped. When's the last time Flash Gordon was super cool? I mean, super cool. Like everybody needed to see the Flash Gordon movie. No, he's an afterthought, but he inspired Star Wars, So these characters will go that route eventually. Right. There will be a generation, there'll be burnout. But I mean, when's the last time you heard about Hopalong Cassidy?
Who?
Yeah, he was on toy boxes, and they sold Hopalong Cassidy hats, and he was on lunch boxes for the kids in the 40s, 50s, and my dad fixed his car.
Wow.
Yeah, true story. They filmed a lot of stuff up where my dad grew up in Sonora, but that's where they would go out and just shoot a lot of those Westerns. So he ended up meeting a lot of those cowboy actors, but
that's awesome.
That's a side note. But the point being is that eventually Batman, Superman, I mean, and it's also the miracle of these characters is that we've had Superman since the late 30s. We've had Batman since the early 40s. Yeah. And I'm part of a generation that they keep getting reinvented and passed on like a baton. And a new generation brings their love to those characters and they expand them and change them. But if you watch how many evolutions Batman's been through in his decades, we're probably going to get a funny Batman again. Right. It's probably going to happen. But that is because the times reflect how we consume these characters. And, in a weird way, the funny Batman that we would get is The Boys, because that's us taking a thing and twisting it and making it, turning it upside down and shaking it this way to see what comes out of the bottom.
Yeah, got you.
The irony, yeah. And also the tropes, making fun of the tropes and because now we can see them. You have to have a trope around long enough before it's even visible. Yes. So if you look at the industry, it's been through, in my time in the industry, it's been through the black and white bubble rose and burst, the Image Marvel bubble rose and burst. And then there was it's been on a slow comeback ever since. But now we're living in the age of the superhero movie. And as soon as superhero movies, which are based on work that guys like me did back in 1970 and early 80s, all these stories that they're telling now came out of the late 70s, early 80s. So we're seeing comic book stories on the big screen that are many decades old. Yeah. And characters that were created around that time. Spider-Man only came around in the mid 60s. So he's about as old as me, and this is we're living in that time now because people are just now discovering what us nerds have known for decades. But it's being served up on a silver platter with a lot of hot sauce, Yeah. And so they don't have to learn to make a pizza. They're just ordering it on the phone. It's a big difference. Yes. When I first started drawing Wolverine in my sketchbooks, nobody knew who he was comparatively to now. He's a major character now. Oh, yeah. He was a fringe character then. And now he's, major movie star character. Like now Hugh Jackman and Deadpool, that's like the biggest movie of the summer. But when I was drawing him, I would say, oh, I love Wolverine. And they're like, who's that?
That's crazy.
So, because the only place you could see Wolverine was in the X-Men comic books that you'd have to go out and buy. He wasn't on TV or in the cartoons or anything. This would be the mid-'80s. Right. So I've watched it happen enough to know that it's cyclical. And these characters will find their way to the memory box. And somebody will pick them up and reinvent them again. I think there's like a Buck Rogers thing that's going to blow everybody away that hasn't happened yet. It just needs to be done in the right way in the right hands. Right. Who's been a staple? Conan the Barbarian. Yes. That motherfucker, that guy, always interesting, always cool, never changed him a bit. The Howard people have been very protective of him. Well done, Conan the Barbarian. Always cool. Movie came and went, still cool. Bad movie came and went, still cool. Even Jason Momoa. I love Conan. But
you can't kill Conan, man.
But the point being is but these characters, they find their niche. And as a result, the industry reacts to it. And with the industry reacting rather than proacting, which is where we're at right now, in my opinion. Right. the big corporations have swept in and taken over the comic book companies, which used to act fairly independent of the money people. They made their own money, or they called their own shots, and money would be made from them. So that, ironically, showing you that Stan Lee card, that was the beginning of that. That's when Stan was trying to get a Spider-Man movie made,
right?
And that's what Marvel Films was about. But it wasn't the beginning of the MCU by any means. It was the beginning of the end for Marvel, as it was under Stan. So it's a very strange time to be doing what I'm doing.
Right.
And I'm very fortunate that I planted the seeds for this cornfield in the 80s rather than waiting till now. Because I've seen a lot of people go, well, okay, I've been drawing mainstream comics for 30 years. How do I get my creator-owned thing out there? And some people do and some people don't. But for me, it was like, it wasn't an escape as much as it was, I didn't know what else I could do. That would be my telephone.
Yeah, pick it up if you got to take a call, man.
No, but the idea being is that, we're watching a reactive industry. The music industry is very much like this too.
Yeah.
And I've always I love, again, I like history, and I listen to music from all eras. I had a very strange musical upbringing in that I was the youngest of a lot of kids, and I had an older sister about 3.5 years older than me that I grew up with, and was her room was right next to mine, and parents that were 11 years apart, and on their second marriage when they had my sister and I. So the reason I bring that up is they had me very late in life. So their musical tastes, they were more like grandparent age from all my friends.
Right.
So while all my friends' parents were into the Doobie Brothers and stuff, like my dad was into Frank Sinatra, band.
Right.
He loved all this old big band music, and I'm so glad he did, because that stuff is awesome.
Oh, yeah.
And I got a great education in that. And my mom, on the other hand, totally loved country western, but she liked the classic stuff. So she's a big fan of Marty Robbins, who's fucking awesome. He gets better with over the years. Marty Robbins, Johnny Cash. I saw Johnny Cash when I was a kid.
Wow.
Live. Yeah. Because nobody else would go to concerts with my mom. So she'd take me, and I got to go see Johnny Cash when he was in his prime. I was like 72, 73. So I saw Johnny Cash, but Johnny Cash, and stuff like Sons of the Pioneers and Doris Day, and she liked and the Carter Sisters, stuff like that, classic, the foundations of rock and roll in a lot of ways too, like that. A lot of that country western stuff was a good foundation for what would become a whole other wave of rock. So I got a big education in that, because that's what I didn't get to listen to what I wanted to listen to at all, but I kind of fell in love with what everybody else liked. And my sister at the time was really into whatever was super pop and bubblegum of the 70s.
Stuff.
So I was like the Bee Gees, the Grease soundtrack, and Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, and stuff like that. So that was the foundation of and ABBA. She loved ABBA, and I do too. Shamelessly, I admit, some of the best songs ever written.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Oh, they're so good. I mean, when you're a kid, you like ABBA. It's like your sexuality is somehow tied into the music you like. Yeah. You like ABBA? What are you, one of these? Like, fuck you. But also, my parents were really religious, so I wasn't allowed to listen to cool stuff. So anything that had like a slightly demonic or scary cover, no, Darick, you can't have it. So I didn't discover Led Zeppelin until I was on my own, because I noticed your T-shirt, and I'm like, they're now like my desert. They're like my desert island band. Like if you said, okay, you can only have one artist on desert island for the rest of your life, I'm like, I think it's going to be Led Zeppelin, because I always hear something new and that stuff.
Right.
And I play, but I can't play like Jimmy Page, no matter how hard I try.
Well, you're not alone, bro. You're not alone.
Right on. But that's that whole, and I'm sorry to digress into my musical taste, but the reason I say
it's
that,
fascinating. Go for it.
Well, the reason I say that is it's also the foundation for my artistic taste. So I learned a long time ago that the past doesn't go. This is the whole philosophy of Transmet. Is when I was starting issue 7, I think it was 7 or 8, and I moved to Italy. Florence, Italy, to live. My then girlfriend went to study, And I went along with her. And I'd never lived abroad in my life. I hadn't been to Europe proper ever. I'd been to Sweden once. And I was, again, jumping in the deep end. And the best year of my life. I go back all the time. I speak fluent Italian now, badly, but I do. But well enough that I can get by, and I get compliments now. Hey, your Italian's very good. Well, thank you.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's cool. It's nice. It really opens up doors. So, but I'm sitting there in the Piazza di Signoria. My wife is off at school. I'm completely by myself, miles away from anybody I know, and figuring out what the hell I'm doing in Florence, Italy. But I took my drawing board out and I took my paper out to work on this issue of Transmet. And I just sat there and I looked at how that doorway was constructed, how those windows are. And by living in an old city, which is centuries old, I discovered something that would end up being the main philosophy for Transmetropolitan and ultimately my art and my music taste all together, is that the past never goes away. The past is always with us. It's just where it gets put. And so the world of Transmet that I would start building from there started to be dictated by like how I saw the past being incorporated. So you had this, my apartment building was 500 years old. And I would go up these ancient steps to get to my apartment. It had a big wooden door with one of those classic old locks. We had a big ass key, big metal key to open the outer door. Yeah, it was awesome. Like those locks probably hadn't been changed in 300 years, but I'm living in the past. I'm living with hundreds-year-old technology, but I'm, alive and well in 1997. And downstairs, what probably used to be a barn is now this fancy building where they're selling clothes. And, everybody's got a little telephone, and neon signs are on top of these ancient buildings to say, hey, they've electrified everything. The Wi-Fi is great in Florence. And that is the way the present interacts with the past. And if you can appreciate it and not take it for granted and really look at it, you'll see your place in history in the moment. So I found that really interesting because now I like looking at the artists I grew up on to see what can I learn from them now that my skill set has come up here and I can draw better and I don't need to figure out the fundamentals as much as I can figure out technique. I'm back to looking at Dave Stevens. I've always looked at Brian Bolland, but I'm looking at just to study their inking technique because it took me a long time to become my own inker. And now I'm studying technique, and now it's starting to come to me in ways that I'm like, oh, look, they did that too, and I didn't even know that. And, you probably hear that in music as well. Yeah. And so like the fundamentals of my musical taste are from everywhere. It's like, whatever just speaks to me is, like Stephen King once said, I may be a monkey, but I know what I like. And that's music. It's like, if a song is good, a song is good. I'm tired of tying up my identity or anything with like a song that I might find good. I remember, because even to this day, you'll have somebody go, like my best friend hates Snow Patrol. Like he can't stand Snow Patrol.
Your friend is right.
Snow Patrol?
Oh God, yes.
I love them.
They're in my kill list along with Coldplay.
Yeah, see, I like them too, but I like them along with a lot of other stuff. But I would rather just talk about what we both like rather than what you hate.
Well, hatred is a big part of my personality, so don't take it away from me.
Well, hey, that's fair because I'm sure if we got into it, I would have an equal list of shit that like, oh, that's the worst, But that's what makes it wonderful. I was on a train going through Switzerland with my family back in 2019, and for whatever reason, we got booked on this panoramic train to the Swiss Alps on our way to Italy, and it was beautiful. And then this French TV station was like interviewing passengers. And they wouldn't leave us alone because we were the only Americans on the train, I guess. I guess we were interesting. They didn't know who I was or anything, but they kept talking to us. But then they said, is this better than that? And I said, travel is a feast. It's not a competition. It's like we need to treat the world more like it's a feast, not a competition. Music is a feast. And for me, it's like the idea of, great, you don't like Coldplay? You don't like Snow Patrol? No problem. I'm going to listen to them on my headphones
100%.
and enjoy the fuck out of them. And you listen to whatever you like. And isn't it wonderful that we can do that? Because in the old days, it's like, I'm running into a bank vault, but I'm only getting $5 bills. I'm a $5 bill man. And that's the way it is. Okay, well, have at it, Haas. I like these hundreds. They look pretty good to me.
That's a good point. Well, you've got to have the thing that you react against as well, haven't you? You know what I mean? Like, that is the push and pull that creates things. You got to have the light to have the dark, and you got to have the dark to have the light. You know what I mean? You need both. And for me, I've just always lent more in the direction of the angry punk rock reactive kind of.
But see, I met Joey Ramone.
What? No way.
I have a picture of me and Joey Ramone together. I mean, from back in the day. But I mean, but my tastes are all over the place. You tell me, you name a genre of music, I'll tell you an artist I like.
That's cool, man.
So that's
but it seems as if you are like that with everything.
It's a feast for me. Yeah, I am.
It seems like the world is like life is a feast for you. It sounds like it's like the music, what you're seeing around you, what you're watching, being in Italy, looking at the door construction. All of that is going into the same fucking sponge and then coming out through your unique kind of expression.
I never thought of it that way, but yes. But I have taste. I mean, I'm not like a guy. I'm fussy, but there's definitely music I can't stand, but I just don't listen to it. I don't shit on the people that like it.
Fair, yeah.
I just go, that's not for me. That's not something I enjoy. But I don't begrudge anybody else for having a good time with it.
Yeah.
Like there's like, speaking of country western, I'll tell you 5 bands I like that are out there right now. But I'll tell you, like, if you're another one of those guys that's going, and I'm a pickup truck and I'm getting into the jeans and I'm down by the water and you know what I mean? I'm like, that's the same as the guy that's going, I got the titties in my hands and the big champagne. It's like, you're just singing about the same shit. Like, if you have something to say, I'm really interested in that.
Same.
And that's, I think really what it comes down to is like, I'm always a sucker for a story. So if you got a song that tells me a story or makes me think about something or kicks me in the ass because I'm like, oh man, that's a good line. Like that I don't care what kind of music it is, I'll listen to that story,
Yeah, love it, man. Well put as well. Well, let's talk about the music then, because, you told me when we spoke previously that you yourself are a musician as well. So where are you at in your musical journey? Are you just starting out? Are you learning? Can you play?
I'll pay something for you.
Oh, sweet.
I don't know how good this is going to sound because it's going to be coming through my headphones.
Yeah.
Can you hear that?
Sounds great.
You say you stand by your man. Tell me something don't understand. You said you love that's bad. And then you left. You feel trapped.
Oh man. That was a podcast first, baby. Live music performance. Love it. That sounded great, man.
Did it come through okay?
Yeah, it sounded fucking surprisingly.
I
sounded
couldn't hear myself
good.
very well through my. It was like I was singing with my ears and my fingers in my ears. So
that came out really well. Yeah, in fact, singing as well as playing, bro. I didn't know you could actually fucking like properly play.
That's what I normally do. Like when I'm drawing, I just stop and I'll pick up and do that for a little bit.
That's so cool. Are you self-taught? You teaching yourself, or have you got a teacher?
Yeah, no, I'm self-taught, and I'm YouTube is my friend now. But
right.
I played piano for a lot of years as a kid,
right?
And so I got a lot of music theory, and I write my own stuff. And
cool, man.
But in the recently, it's fun learning shit, and I'm getting much better going up and down the neck, and I'm learning licks, and like I can badly if we were not on a podcast and we were just sitting in a room, like I could play like "Here Comes Your Man" by Pixies, and I learned that lick.
Oh, that's so. Seeing like you playing that then, and hearing you talking about the things you're learning and the excitement, it reminds me of when I was sort of where you were at, was in my early 20s, late teens, maybe younger, with the guitar, doing that same thing. You know what I mean? Like we didn't have YouTube back then, so it was like learning from magazines and cassettes.
We didn't have it when I started either. I used to buy guitar, but the good news is that like when as a kid, because I learned piano, I learned to read music a little bit. The biggest challenge I had was learning to figure out what's happening on the guitar that relates to the piano, because they're two very different instruments. And it took me a long time to realize, like, oh, I see. All these 6 strings, that's like 6 keys on the piano, and they're stacked like this. And as soon as I understood that, then it started to take off for me, and then I could read.
Right.
But I also know, like, because I can understand music theory, like you can tell me any key, and I could play in that key. I just had to learn the chords.
Oh, that's cool.
So if we were hanging out and jamming, and you said, "Hey, I'm going to play something in C," and you put me at the piano, I'll play along with you, no problem.
To blues in A or whatever.
In fact, I'm actually better if I'm just improvising on a piano than if I try to play you something.
That's so cool. That's so cool, man. Yeah. I mean, it really takes me back to like when I was learning, and there was a whole world of possibility that I was like delving into blind. You know what I mean? The excitement of rushing back to work on that lick and finally mastering it. And you said something interesting to me in the email. You said that now that like art and the illustration stuff has kind of become your job as such.
Yes.
That music is now the thing that's getting your juices going.
Yeah, well, it's like, but I mean, I only do that for me. I mean, I played that for you because by request, you said, "Hey, play me something." Okay, I'll play you something. But I don't try to go out there and go, "I'm going to be a musician now." And I have massive respect for people that are. And like, that's actually why I was excited to talk to you, because I had a feeling we would find more in common than not, but you're doing what I wish I could do, and you like what I do. So I think we come at a very interesting place.
Oh, yeah, 100%, man. Well, it's exactly the same for me. And I remember I said to you, when you said that, like, now that art has kind of become your job, that music is now your refuge. Well, it's the exact kind of same situation for me, because now music is kind of my job. I do like have this kind of fantasy that one day I'm going to retire and, not spend any more time in a transit van and actually spend my time just down the Mediterranean painting. I've never painted before in my life, but I really feel like that's the next thing for me. It's something that I would just do just purely for fun, to enjoy it, to use my hands and to lose myself. And just for my, exactly what you're describing is what the guitar brings to you,
James, Jamie, I want to challenge you.
Okay.
Don't wait. There's nothing wrong with being terrible at something. Waste some paper. Do some shitty paintings right now. Because you think, and this is what we all make the mistake of in life. We think we have this imaginary future where we're happy and old and can afford it, and then we're going to do the thing we want to do. Yeah. But the truth is, we don't know. We never know. And I think we both discussed privately about losing loved ones.
Yeah.
And, how much I wish my dad was around to see what's happening for me today, because he was so supportive of me in those space fever years that not being able to be with him, I never got to hand my children over to him to hold. It's like, those things are hard. But it's also, I also dreamed that there was going to be a day I was going to buy him a ranch, and we would be able to like spend evenings on the porch together and talk about how great life is. And it just doesn't happen. So waste some paper, go buy some paints, go buy a little, it's like $15 for a good watercolor kit, and buy a stack of, buy a pad of paper. You're going to spend maybe $40 and just fuck around, make some mistakes, paint some bad paintings.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And you know what's great about YouTube?
You're right.
YouTube will tell you how to do it.
Yeah, no, you are totally right. I've been dragging my heels for way too long. I'm really excited about the idea of having a new passion and a new hobby and a new challenge, and something that I can learn from scratch again with that same excitement that I did when I was 10, learning to play blues in G or something.
But that's the thing that's really fascinating, is that we deny ourselves things that we really don't have to. Because again, life can be a feast if you just look for, if you don't deny yourself, if you're trying not to be like, I have no aspirations of being on a big stage with anybody anytime soon. I don't think anybody's going to have me up to like, "Darick, come play your shitty version of Stand By Me by The Clash." All right. Stadium's going crazy. Here's some fat dude with glasses. Come on. Another old white dude with a guitar. Yeah.
Yeah, just what the world needs.
Ladies and gentlemen, I only play acoustic. Yeah.
Yes.
I can't do a lead to save my life. Right on. But
I wish that the listeners could have seen you gesticulating and waving your arms around just like I could then.
But that's the, but that's okay, because it's like, for me, it's like that's like eating a bite, take a break, drink a glass of wine, have some popcorn. That's playing the guitar for me.
Love it.
You know?
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, drinking some wine is exactly what I'm going to go and do now, my man. So before I let you go, man, this has been a really, really fun chat. I feel like we could probably talk for hours. But we've got to do some plug-in, man. We got to let the people know what you've got coming up, what's going on.
Yeah, please do. Because actually, indie comics, this comes full circle too. Like, the industry is in a weird place, but a lot of the talented people that have been laid off at DC and some of these smaller companies that aren't doing so well, that talent moves to another company. And then once upon a time, there were Gold Key Comics and Charlton Comics and EC Comics and Atlas Comics and all these different industry legends that between the 70s and 80s came and went. And that's just the publishing industry. Just like there were record labels that are no longer around, you know?
Yeah.
Same kind of deal. So, but a lot of the talent is now trying to do their own thing. So people that know a lot about publishing and editing starting their own company. So that's the case of Magma Comics, where I'm working with two veteran guys from the industry, Denton Tipton and Bobby Curnow, and they've started a really cool create-our-own company. And they've only got a handful of titles, but all of them are good and all of them with talented people. And they've let me do one. So
awesome.
But this is the first time I've written a book that I'm not drawing. And normally I wrote the first script for myself to draw. But then I was looking at my friend Steven, and Steven has had a 20-plus year career in professional animation. He was one of the designers of Batman Beyond.
Wow.
He was he's worked on an endless list of cool stuff, and I can't rattle it off, but I promise you, it's awesome. And he's worked under Bruce Timm and Darwin Cook. He was one of the animators on the New Frontier movie based on Darwin's work. Great stuff. And so, but his style looks nothing like mine. And one of the things that I thought worked really well about The Boys was I brought a love for superheroes and my dark sense of humor to Garth's cynical, vision of the superhero world and what it would mean for our world. And that's where it kind of got a yin yang. Like, I knew where to make it funny and punch up his comedy. And I knew where to, bring some sweetness. And I also knew what a good superhero should look like what would fool the people in that world.
Right. Yes.
So because I basically, how do I fool myself? So how do I make these characters likable? Well, I draw them like my likable characters. So I saw that in Steven's work, but Steven does not have my dark sense of humor. He's actually got kind of a sweetness to his work. So I thought if I took this apocalyptic kind of gringy, dark story and put his cartoon style on top of it, maybe we'd have something kind of magical. And I think we did it.
Really?
And when we get off, I'll send you the first issue. When we get off, you can tell me what you think.
Bro, I would love that. Thank you.
But I'm getting some good quotes from my colleagues that were kind enough. But Mark Wade loved it. Fabian Nicieza loved it. And so I'm getting some nice quotes that we're going to be blasting out there. But it's the first time I've written something that I'm not drawing, and I'm kind of art directing. But I love being a writer, because I'm now writing for somebody else to draw. Yeah. And so my imagination's going into a whole new place, because I don't have to worry about how it's going to look on the page. That's Steven's job. I have to worry about how does the story come together? Are these good characters? Is this going somewhere? And I'm getting big pats on the back from my colleagues who are writers.
Man, that's amazing. I can't wait to check that out, man.
I hope you like it.
I'm sure I'm going to love it, man. Tell the folks what it's called and when it's out and where they can get it.
Magma Comics, and it's called Greaser Gemini Blues. That's for the first 4 issues. If we get another 4 issues, it'll be Greaser something else.
Right.
Like The Empire Strikes Back. It's going to be a different subtitle, but Greaser is the part you want to remember.
There we go, boys and girls.
From
Greaser.
your old pal, Darick Robertson.
Yes, indeed.
Famous musician, Darick Robertson.
Yes, for whom we just had the world exclusive live performance here on the James Kennedy podcast. Just for you lucky listeners.
Yeah.
Oh, Darick, dude, this has been a lot of fun. We could talk for fucking hours.
I've enjoyed it.
I can't keep you all day, mate. I know it's a working day for you out there, man. So
it is a working day for me, and I almost forgot to do this, and I'm glad I didn't. It was a pleasure, Jamie. If you ever want me back, let me know. I'd love to talk to you again.
Oh, 100% likewise, bro. Yeah, let's definitely do this again, and we'll incorporate a little bit of alcohol next time just to get the party going. I'm just going to give a quick plug to your stuff before you rush off. Greaser Gemini Blues episode 1 is out now on Magma Comics. Please rush out and get it. You will not regret it. The brilliant and the awesome Mr. Darick Robertson is at DarickRobertson.com, Darick WR on Instagram, and Darick R on Twitter. Give him a follow, give him a like, give him some love. And for all you guys out there that are currently watching The Boys on Amazon, remember, Darick Robertson is the co-creator and original illustrator of The Boys, so go and tell him how much you love it. Darick, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for stopping by, man. We appreciate you. Thank you for all of the amazing and legendary art and characters that you've given us over the years. Long may you continue to do your thing, brother, and I hope to see you again really soon. Take care, man.
Yeah, you too, Jamie. I really enjoyed it.
Likewise, bro. Have a good day, man.
You bet. Cheers, buddy.
Darick Robertson, co-creator and illustrator of The Boys, creator of the legendary Spider Jerusalem from the Transmetropolitan masterpiece, as well as illustrator for Wolverine, Deadpool, Spider-Man, and tons of other legendary iconic characters that we all know and love so much. And I think you'll agree, an all-around good dude and an absolute gentleman as well. So let's have a standing ovation for the wonderful Mr. Darick Robertson. That was a lot of fun, man. As I said, you got to go and check out his latest work, Greaser, Gemini Blues, which is out now on Magma Comics. Hit him up on his socials, and while you're at it, you can also hit up this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it on. Give us a subscribe, a follow, a rating, and a review. You know the drill by now, man. Just look at all this awesome fucking content that you guys are getting for free. And what do I ask in return? The mere click of a button. It's the least you can do, bro. Go and get on it. And if you're in Leicester, Sheffield, Wolverhampton, Manchester, Reading, Cardiff, or any of the other places we're playing, come and hang out with James Kennedy and the Underdogs, because we are setting off on the motorway first thing tomorrow morning. If you want to stay up to date with what we're doing, it's James Kennedy UK on Instagram. And I'll be back next week with another great conversation with another awesome guest. Don't say I'm not good to you. Have an awesome week. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. See you next time.